We're a livestock country first and foremost.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Comstock channel. I'm Marlin Bohling with you. Thanks again for joining us. And with your help, we continue to be one of the fastest growing ag podcasts out there in North America. Thank you for your help. How do you do that? Well, you have been liking these videos. You've been sharing these videos with others. And also, you subscribe by clicking on the bell icon down below. And that lets us notify you every time we have a new update that comes out. So thanks again for all your help. It's been a pleasure talking with you about all ag issues and ag market activity. Today, my very special guest is Jamie Mackay, or Jamie, as I like to hear the way you pronounce it down under, Jamie Mackay, right?
Absolutely, Marlin. Mackay, not McKay. Scottish descent, so you've got to stick with Mackay. Great to catch up with you again. Of course, I took a group of New Zealand farmers over to the US in 2018, and you were kind enough to host us in one of my favourite cities in the States, Nashville. So we had a great time. So it's great to catch up again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for doing this. I've been wanting to catch up with you for a little while. You are actually in New Zealand as we speak. I refer to it as down under because you're in the southern hemisphere there, but you actually are the founder and I guess the head honcho of a network that is called The Country out there, or a programming network called The Country. It deals with ag issues, and you're basically all over the country of New Zealand with your content, right?
Yeah, and that sounds rather majestic, doesn't it? All over the country. And it's great. It's great to have a rural commercial program that's nationwide, but our country consists of about 5.3 million people, not as many as yours, 2 islands, North Island and South Island. You're going to have to come over and visit us, Marlin. But yeah, look, it's really important to get the ag message out there. And I know that you and a number of others in the States are doing the same sort of thing as we're doing. We're doing the radio and the podcasting like you. And New Zealand, obviously, very, very dependent on the primary sector and farming. In fact, about 80% of our exports as a nation come from the primary sector. So without farming, Marlin, we'd be dead in the water.
By the way, I also like the way you say my name, Marlin. I love that accent. Okay, so agriculture is big in New Zealand. A lot of people don't realize that. What are the primary agricultural commodities that are produced there?
Well, the biggest game in town, our biggest export is dairy. Believe it or not, New Zealand controls roughly about 30% of the world's dairy trade. That's not to say we have 30% of the world's dairy production, but of the tradable stuff, a lot of it comes from New Zealand. China's our biggest market there, but we're branching out into other areas because, as you're well aware, the Chinese market is a wee bit sticky at the moment. So in terms of our agricultural exports, dairy is number one, red meat is number two, and horticulture and forestry are about third equal. And to put some numbers around those, dairy might be worth about 25 billion to us. I know these are peanuts compared to the numbers you deal with in the States. You deal with trillions, but say 25 billion for dairy, 10 to 12 billion for red meat. We'll talk about sheep meat in a moment. So tougher times for that industry. Horticulture and forestry, about $7 billion each. So, a major part of a relatively small economy.
You know, Jamie, one of the things affecting the cattle market here in the U.S. this year is we're having trouble rebuilding the herd after 4 straight years of terrible drought. The Southern Plains, they lost their pasture land. The hay production was pretty much wiped out after all that drought. And they're trying to rebuild the herd, but there's so much demand from people after the pandemic that there's so much demand for the meat, we can't hold back the heifers to rebuild the herds. And I think I heard you say a while back that you're having a similar issue in New Zealand, where you're having herds smaller than what you're used to. Is that right?
Well, slightly different angle than yours. And all I can say to you, Marlin, and I'm glad you love the way I say Marlin, is long may it continue. What's happening in the States at the moment, one man's misfortune's another man's good fortune. Because of your beef shortage and your drought in the state, it's been really good news for our beef market. We're sending a lot of manufacturing or grinding beef to the US. In fact, you're taking as much as we can handle. So that's really good news. You're also taking more of our lamb. China's our biggest lamb market. The US is now our second biggest lamb market. So we do really appreciate that. Look, our falling numbers aren't necessarily off the back of drought, although we have had, by our standards, a dryish season. Our falling, especially our sheep numbers, you've got to remember that when I was a young lad growing up on a farm in Southland, right at the bottom of New Zealand, we used to have 20 sheep to every one New Zealander, right? 3 million New Zealanders, 60 million sheep. We got to 70 million sheep in the 1980s when I started out as a young farmer, and we've gradually gone down. We're down from 70 million to 23 million. So, that's a big fall over the last 30 or 40 years. And sheep farming, unfortunately, has just become less and less profitable. And we've seen land use change initially to dairy farming. We've seen some of the better country go to horticulture, some of the poorer country going to forestry. And of course, with forestry comes the carbon credit game. And I'm sure that's happening in the States as well. So there has been a lot of land use. And now we're in a situation where we're worried about our meat industry, particularly our sheep meat industry, just not having enough critical mass.
Did you lose the demand for the meat? Did you lose demand for the wool? Or what was the problem there anyway?
Well, let's start with the wool. Most of our flock is based on strong crossbred fleece. I don't know what your equivalent would be in the States. So it's been really poor. Its main use is for carpet. The market has crashed. No other word for it. It costs more to cut the wool off or shear it off than what you can get for it. So it's a net cost to shear your sheep. The fine wool off our merinos, and the Australians are the world leaders in that. The fine wool's fine because it's going into high value garments. So that market's still held up. And with the lamb, it's been a China story. When China's gone well, pre-COVID, we were rocking and rolling. We were sending as much as we could. They would take as much as we could. But obviously, COVID came along. The Chinese economy hasn't fully recovered from that, and we've had to look towards other markets. And the other thing with lamb is it's a bit more of a niche product, right? And we send quite a bit to Europe as well than, say, beef is. Beef is a stock standard product, especially the manufacturing or grinding meat that we send over for you guys to make your burgers with. So it's a smaller market. Our sheep meat industry, in fact, our sheep industry full stop, is facing some serious challenges. When I was a young lad, Marlin, I originally went to university or college, as you would call it, to become an accountant. My father died when I was quite young, so I went back to the farm, and I was a sheep farmer for 10 years. And I tried to buy some more land. The bank wouldn't lend me any money. So I eventually left farming and got into radio. Haven't looked back since. Probably been a lucky move for me.
It sounds like we're on parallel tracks. That's the same thing that happened with me. I did the very same thing. And I told my brother at one point, I said, I like talking about it more than I enjoy doing it when I'm losing money. So that led to a career change, about almost 30 years ago now. Interesting how you say that. All right, so talk to me about the way the demand is for wool nowadays. Did the global demand just evaporate? Is there no desire for wool anymore, or what's going on?
Well, as I said before, strong wool, that's the main wool we produce off our flock, has basically just been used for carpets. We used to export it, believe it or not, to Nepal, export the raw product over there, and then import the rugs back. But look, in the good old days, wool in the 1950s, once again, thanks to America, you guys had a bit of a thing with Korea. You might remember that. It was the Korean War in the early 1950s. And off the back of that, off clothing all those brave American soldiers who went over to fight there, we had a wool boom, and wool went through the roof. In fact, farmers, you hear great stories about farmers who are able to pay off their farm loans literally in 1 year off the back of their wool check. So in those days, to put some context around it, so strong crossbred wool might be worth maybe $2.50 a kilo now. When I was a young farmer in the 1980s, it was worth $5 or $6 a kilo. We've had a lot of inflation since then, but you go back to the 1950s when we had the Korean War wool boom, in modern day equivalents, it's worth about $50 a kilo. So in real terms, it's become almost a worthless product. So there's a lot of research and work being done on alternative uses for strong wool over and above carpets. We want to use it as wall coverings. We want to use it as insulation. We want to use it for mopping up oil slicks. Hopefully there's not too many of those. We were hoping that one of the side effects of COVID might have been using our wool as a filter for masks. So there's all these potential uses out there. I even interviewed a woman recently who's making wool into lipstick because it's got the, the keratin or whatever it is in the wool and the lanolin, the stuff that makes your hands nice and soft. So we're looking for alternate uses, but at the moment, wool is an uneconomic proposition here in New Zealand.
You know, I was looking at your website a couple of days ago, and I believe you had a story on there about a family that, forgive me for my ignorance, but they were looking into getting, is it shearless sheep or developing like a shearless sheep? What was that about?
Well, but because the cost of shearing your sheep exceeds the income you can get from selling the wool, when I say a lot of farmers, there's certainly a movement of going into self-shedding sheep. There are different breeds, but the main one over here at the moment is the Wiltshire. So instead of having to shear your sheep once a year or twice a year, as we do sometimes for management purposes here, and having to dag them, of course, sheep can get daggy. I don't know what you would call it over there. This is round the rear end, when they poop out, it gets stuck in the wool and you get dags. Not a good thing. So these self-shedding sheep have no wool around the points of the sheep, and basically they just once a year self-shed. So there's no shearing costs, and they're just basically, you've got these sheep as an out-and-out meat breed. So as it stands at the moment, the economics of that are pretty good. But that's not to say in 5 or 10 years' time that we won't find some wonderful use for strong wool, and all of a sudden you're going to have to try and breed that flock back to be a wool-producing flock, and that's not something you can do overnight. So it's a decision that you wouldn't make lightly, but I know quite a few farmers in New Zealand are.
You admitted that you yourself are a farmer. And if you look over your right shoulder there on the wall, I see you have pretty good evidence of that. It looks like you have a familiar tractor color over there. Tell me about that. Do you grow crops too?
Well, yeah, I'm an ex-farmer now, Marlin, but I do have a share. The radio is kind of my full-time gig, but I do have a share in a dairy farm, and I also have investment in kiwi fruit. Obviously, horticulture. It's our biggest horticulture export. And in the back there is a green tractor, as you can see, John Deere. I don't need to introduce those to your American viewers and listeners there, Marlin. We're actually sponsored here in New Zealand by a Canadian company called Brandt, who are now, as I understand it, the biggest John Deere dealers in the world. And they've only been in the business of selling John Deere tractors for about 6 or 7 years. I stand to be corrected on that one, but they're a dynamic go-ahead company, Canadian company, and they're expanding their operation right around the world. And here in New Zealand, they have bought the entire North Island dealership for John Deere, and I think it won't be long until they get their hands on the South Island. But they're a really good company to deal with. John Deere, a great product, even though when I was a young farmer, I used to drive blue tractors, Ford tractors, but John Deere are certainly top of the range. And I'm hoping to take another farming tour over your way, Marlin, and I'm going to go hopefully to the John Deere Golf Classic near Chicago, maybe in 2026, because we had such a great time with the group of farmers I took on my kind of Midwest tour. We started in Kentucky, followed the Mississippi down. I obviously went to Nashville, Memphis, down to New Orleans and out through Houston. Had an absolutely fantastic time. I love your country, Marlin. In fact, I love it so much. I'm going over there in mid-October to spend 2 weeks in New York, Washington, not Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Boston, Washington, yeah, so I can at first hand get my take on your American presidential election. It fascinates me.
Well, I don't know how good of a spectator sport that would be. It'd probably be
Well,
fascinating, that's for
it
sure.
might be a blood sport.
It could be this year. You never know. Yeah, we love having you when you come over here, and I've had a chance to meet you a couple of times here, and I know you always bring tour groups with you. It's great. We love to compare notes. I hope I get to see you again this year if you do that. So tell me, Australia is a big competitor of the U.S. if it comes to things like wheat, maybe cotton. Um, do you grow much in the way of crops in New Zealand? That's a pretty rough terrain, isn't it?
We have a lot of mountainous country, but we also have large areas of plains, like the Canterbury Plains in the South Island are beautiful arable country. Nothing like the Midwest. I've been lucky enough to spend some time in Chicago, and I spent a day driving west of Chicago, and well, I guess it's into your corn belt, and you're just a magnificent cropping country. Like very small operators. A lot of our good arable country, country that would have perhaps in the 60s, 70s, and 80s have been growing wheat or other cereal crops, got converted to dairy farming. They put a bit of water on it, irrigated it, and went dairy farming because that was the most profitable land use. And of course, that's not without some environmental um, effects, causes and effects, I guess, and that's had some issues with the environment, with water quality and that. But believe it or not, we're a net importer of grain. We import a lot of our milling wheat from Australia, and we can do it more cheaply than growing it here. But in summary, like horticulture, arable's a very small part of the pie of the cereal crops. As I said, our biggest export horticulture crop is kiwi fruit. We are one of the world's leading exporters of kiwi fruit. Apples are pretty big here as well. And avocados were going quite well, but unfortunately, we've seen a bit of an avocado glut, and the stuff's rotting on the ground now. But no, look, we're a livestock country first and foremost. So dairy cattle, sheep, and beef cattle, and deer as well.
Deer, I hadn't heard that one. In captivity, you have them fenced in?
Yeah, you have them fenced in with big high deer fences, and that was an industry that was created in the 1960s and 70s, and they basically did it with live capture. They went up into the mountains, they tranquilized deer or put shot deer nets at them, and that's how we built up our deer herd. So, deer is a good product because you get two bites at the cherry. You get the venison, the meat, obviously, as well as the velvet. And a lot of our velvet is taken, obviously, by the Asian countries. South Korea is our biggest market there. So, yep, two bites at the cherry on that one. And our deer farmers are doing okay at the moment. I used to say that sheep farming was two bites at the cherry as well, the meat and the wool. But as we've discussed, unfortunately, the wool is a bit of a loss maker at the moment.
Well, here, of course, we're about 2 weeks away from fall. That means you're 2 weeks away from spring in your hemisphere there. What's the weather like where you are right now?
Well, I live in a little town it's a little by your standards. It's a city called Dunedin at the bottom of New Zealand, or near the bottom. It is called the Edinburgh of the South. Strong Scottish ancestry and roots for this town, but the bottom of the South Island's been very wet, and I was talking about the Canterbury Plains, which is up near a city called Christchurch. Some of your viewers and listeners might remember Christchurch. They suffered a terrible earthquake, or two terrible earthquakes in 2010 and 2011, basically flattened the place. They've rebuilt it. So up there, they're incredibly dry, And then you get up nearer the top of the country. Auckland's obviously our biggest city. Just down from that, there's a place called Hamilton, about the same size as Dunedin, and it's sort of the dairy farming capital, and they're having a pretty good season there. But we're an island nation. We're prone to lots of wind, lots of rain, and I think under climate change, whether you buy into that or not, I think we're getting more climate extremes. We can get very dry during El Nino, and we can get very wet on the east coast of both islands under La Nina. And in fact, a couple of years ago, we had another shocking natural disaster, Cyclone Gabrielle, which destroyed quite a bit of the country, and that was in a La Nina year. And I say that with all due respect, having been down to the likes of New Orleans and seen what cyclones and hurricanes can do in your country, or have done in your country.
Yeah, I know you are fairly prone to earthquakes in that part of the world there. When's the last time you had a major one? You mentioned the one at Christchurch.
Well, in terms of doing major damage, yeah, the one in Christchurch, in fact, there was a series of them, but there was September 2010 and the big one was February 2011, and that was major. That was major, building collapses. We lost 185 people in that second Christchurch earthquake, which happened at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Luckily, thankfully, the first big earthquake in September of 2010 happened at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And basically everyone was in bed and people weren't out and about because all the damage and the life lost was in the city centre where some of the buildings collapsed. We had a 6 or 7 story building collapsed. It was responsible for about 120 brave souls losing their life there. But you're dead right. We live on a fault line, a major fault line here in New Zealand. We are called the Shaky Isles. And, hopefully it's after I've been and gone, but we will get another big one here in New Zealand. That's just the price we pay for living in God's own country.
Jamie, I always enjoy talking with you so much. It's so good to see you again. And now with this new technology, we can actually see each other from a distance. It used to be we would talk on the phone. And for people that don't realize, there's a little bit of a time difference here. It took a little bit of coordinating to make this work. So you explain it a couple different ways. I look at it as you're running, about 17 hours ahead of me, I believe. I think you say you're 7 hours behind, but a day ahead. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. When I talk to my guy, Todd Clark, in Lexington, Kentucky, I often chat to him at, say, 11 o'clock in the morning. It will be 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, his time, but the day before. So, yeah, you can skin it either way there, Marlin. We're right on the international date line. We're the first country in the world almost to welcome the new day.
That's awesome. Well, look us up. If you get a chance to get into the U.S. this fall, make sure you give us a holler and let us know where you are. If nothing else, I'll meet you for lunch or something.
Well, we might have to have virtual drinks or something, Marlon, because as I said, in October, like in just over 4 weeks' time, we've got a direct flight. I'm going to be turning 65. I hope I'm not speaking too long here. I'm going to be turning 65 in about 4 weeks' time. And I'm treating myself by doing the new direct flight from Auckland to New York, all 17 hours of it. And I'm going to go and sit up the front end of the plane where it's nice and comfy. And I'm going to do New York, catch a bit of NBA basketball, a bit of NFL football. And then I'm heading up to Boston to have another look at the town. I ran the marathon there in 2009, and I want to go back and have a good look at that. Then I'm down to Philadelphia to run up the Rocky Stairs and see the Freedom Liberty Bell. And then I'm down to Washington, which I've been to before, and I'm really looking forward, as I say, to your American election. I find your politics absolutely fascinating.
Well, that's one way to describe it. Yeah, you mentioned football, and I'm glad you'll get a chance to take some of that in. And that reminds me, before I let you go, you have to explain one of your favorite hobbies, and that's following your type of football down there. And I'm not talking soccer. You have a big obsession with another kind of football, right?
Yeah, it's called Rugby Union. We call it football, but it's actually Rugby Union. and the All Blacks, our national team, over time, over history, have been the most successful international team in world rugby. And we do play against the United States in Rugby World Cups and the like. And I know it's only a minor game in the States, but it is gaining traction. But right now, at the moment, we're maybe, unfortunately, second, third, fourth on a bad day in the world. And head and shoulders the best team in the world at the moment are the Springboks, who come out of South Africa. So, yep, it is absolutely our national game. We're nuts about it, like you guys are about, well, mind you, you have American football, you have the basketball, you have the hockey league. I just love the way you do sport. Absolutely love the way you do sport. So I'm going to get to, hopefully, Madison Square Garden to see a pre-season NBA game when I'm over there, and then whip out and catch, I think it's the New York Jets versus the Buffalo Bills. Am I right? They're both NFL teams. Yeah, out at MetLife Stadium. So I just love the way Americans do sport. I think it's almost as though you go along to the party and a game of basketball breaks out.
So we're just starting the NFL season. When do they play rugby?
Rugby is in our winter, so our rugby season will be, our domestic rugby season sort of finishing in about a month or so. But on the international stage, for instance, our All Blacks will be heading, once they finish their Southern Hemisphere competition, they'll be heading to the Northern Hemisphere to play England, France, Ireland, and I think Scotland on an end-of-season tour in November. So, we might get December, January off. Other than that, it's pretty much all year round now.
Well, Jamie, it's been a pleasure. Tell everybody that I had a chance to meet over your earlier trips here to the U.S. Tell them hi for me, and I look forward to seeing you guys again. And hopefully we can do this sometime before too long, all right?
No, look, I've really enjoyed it. And you must come back on and repay the favour and come on and do a slot on my show as we head into your American election.
Ah, okay. Well, I don't know how much I can contribute to that, but yeah, I'm up for the challenge. So it's been a little while, but yeah, I look forward to it. Jamie Mackay, or as we like to say, McKay, from New Zealand with us here today. He is the manager, the founder of a network with a show called The Country. And he is in the southern part of New Zealand. Well, that will do it for this episode. Thank you again for joining us. And make sure you share this episode with others as well. For producer Brianne Hendrickson, I'm Marlin Bohling. We'll catch you next time here on the Comstock Channel. Thanks for joining us on our Comstock YouTube channel. Don't forget you can also find us on Facebook and TikTok as well. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and or options is substantial, and each investor and or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.